The bride stopped walking. In the middle of her own wedding, her smile didn't disappear, it cracked. She stared past the altar, her voice cutting clean through the music as the microphone caught it. Are you serious right now? Every head in the room turned. At the back of the hall stood her ex.
Cha Wooyoung,
A Korean mafia boss who had not been invited. And on his arm was a black woman no one recognized. The bride laughed softly, the kind of laugh meant to humiliate without looking cruel. You always did have a thing for charity cases. The room went quiet. Then the woman beside him stood up. She didn't rush. She didn't look at him for permission. She walked down the aisle, took the microphone from the officiant's hand, smiled sweetly at the bride and said, "Don't worry. He didn't replace you." She paused. He upgraded. The wedding never recovered. If you already feel something pulling you into this story, hit the like button. Because what's about to happen in that room? Nobody saw it coming. 48 hours earlier, Imani Perry was doing what she did on most Thursday nights, moving through the controlled chaos of one of the most expensive lounges in Los Angeles without breaking a sweat. The lounge sat in West Hollywood, all smoked glass and low amber lighting, the kind of place that charged $40 for a cocktail and expected gratitude for it. Imani had worked there for 2 years. She was not a socialite. She was not impressed. She was sharp, watchful, and exceptionally good at reading a room, which in her line of work was the difference between a calm evening and a lawsuit. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when the man grabbed her wrist. He was drunk in the specific way that wealthy men become drunk, not sloppy but loosened, the internal governor that keeps their worst instincts in check now offline. He was a tech investor, mid-50s, wearing a watch that cost more than most people's annual rent. He grabbed her wrist because something she had said, a polite but firm correction about his order, had apparently offended him, and men like him were not accustomed to being corrected. "You should be more careful," he said, his grip tightening. Security was on the other side of the room. They had not seen it happen. Imani set the tray down on the nearest flat surface with one hand. Then, in one smooth motion that looked almost gentle, she took the man's wrist, rotated it at precisely the angle that forced his arm into discomfort without causing damage, and held it there while leaning close enough that only he could hear her clearly. "Apologize," she said. "Not a request. Not a suggestion." He stared at her. "I said apologize. Loudly enough that the people at the next table can hear it." He was sputtering, half from the pain and half from the shock of it. But she held the position with complete stillness, and after a moment, when it became clear she was going to wait as long as necessary, he cleared his throat and said, with visible humiliation, "I apologize." She released him, picked up the tray, moved on. From the VIP section, half screened by frosted glass, Cha Wooyoung had watched the entire thing without moving. He was there with 3 associates, none of whom had noticed what happened. Wooyoung had excused himself from the conversation 2 minutes before the incident began, and he had been watching Imani since, not with interest, exactly, but with the particular attention of a man who makes his living assessing people. He watched the way she moved, the way she read the room, the way she had handled the investor, efficient, controlled, zero theatrics. When she passed near the VIP section an hour later, he said, "Excuse me." She stopped, looked at him with no particular expression. "Sit down," he said. She did not sit down. "I'm working. I'll pay for your time." "I'm not that kind of employee." "I know," he said. "I mean, I'll compensate the lounge for the hour." "Sit down." She considered him for a moment. Then she pulled out the chair across from him and sat, and she looked at him with the directness of someone who had decided that if she was going to give this man a minute, she was going to give him exactly 1 minute and nothing extra. "I need someone to attend an event with me," he said. "This Saturday." "A wedding." "You want arm candy?" "Yes." The directness of it seemed to catch her slightly off guard. She had expected deflection, perhaps a more sophisticated framing. Instead, he had just said yes. "My ex is getting married," he continued. "I will not attend alone. The optics are important." You're using me, she said. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. $50,000, he said. The event is 4 hours long. I'll cover anything you need, dress, transportation, accommodations if necessary. She leaned back slightly. If someone disrespects me at this event, I respond how I want. That's non-negotiable. He studied her. She could tell he was calculating, not whether she was serious, but what exactly that would mean in practice. Agreed, he said. She had no idea that he had no idea what he had just agreed to. They went dress shopping the following afternoon. He had sent a car. She had declined the personal stylist he offered and walked into the boutique in Silver Lake herself, moving through the racks with the decisiveness of someone who had a clear picture in her mind and was simply looking for the physical object that matched it. He sat in a chair near the entrance and watched. She held up 3 options, rejected 2 immediately, and carried the third, the burgundy silk, to the fitting room. She came out. She stood in front of the mirror. She looked at herself for exactly 4 seconds.
This one, she said.
The stylist suggested. I know what she suggested. She looked at him in the mirror's reflection. This one. He said nothing. She turned to face him directly. You almost looked pleased just now. I wasn't. You were. He stood up and walked toward the counter to handle the purchase, and she watched his back with an expression that was not quite a smile but was in the same neighborhood as one. In the car to Beverly Hills that evening, a test run for the following day's route, she sat beside him in the back seat and watched the city light up outside the window. You still love her, she said. The silence that followed was not defensive. It was the silence of a man who had been given an answer he was still examining. I don't like losing, he said finally. Same thing. He turned his head to look at her. She was still looking out the window. It isn't, he said. You're attending your ex-girlfriend's wedding to make a statement, she said. That's not the behavior of someone who's over it. That's the behavior of someone who needs to win even when they're no longer in the game. He said nothing. I'm not judging you, she added. I'm just telling you what I see. Another silence. Longer this time. You're observant, he said. That's why you picked me. He almost smiled. She did not look at him, so she did not see it. But it was there. The following day, they arrived at the estate where the ceremony was being held, and the rest had already been told. The doors swinging open, the march faltering, the words charity case landing like a blade, and then bouncing off because Imani Perry was not the kind of woman that blade stuck to. After the upgrade line, the officiant cleared his throat with considerable professional courage and resumed the ceremony. The vows were completed with the particular stiffness of a situation that everyone present has agreed, silently and collectively, to pretend did not happen. Yura's smile was rebuilt from pieces. The groom looked like a man who was already doing the math for the rest of his life. The reception began in the adjacent garden, lit with string lights and the last hour of California sun. Yura found Imani near the bar 20 minutes in. She approached with 2 women flanking her, which was meant to communicate something. She stood slightly too close. I'm curious, she said pleasantly. How much is he paying you? Imani accepted a glass of sparkling water from the bartender. Enough, she said, and turned slightly as though the conversation were already finished. Yura's pleasant expression held. I don't mean any offense. It's just, I know Wooyoung. He doesn't do anything without a reason. So I'm wondering what you're getting out of it. Besides the dress. Besides the dress, Imani echoed thoughtfully. I'm having a very interesting evening. One of the flanking women laughed softly, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that supported Yura. It was the kind that appreciated what Imani had just said. Yura moved on. 15 minutes later, Imani was standing near the entrance to the garden when the champagne hit her. The impact was too direct, too central, too thoroughly drenching to be accidental, but it was performed with the particular theater of an accident. The sharp intake of breath, the horrified expression, the flurry of dabbing with a napkin that did nothing. Oh my God, Yura said, her hand pressed to her chest. I didn't see you there. The guests nearby had gone quiet. Phones had not yet risen, but they were thinking about it. Imani looked down at the soaked front of her burgundy silk. She looked up at Yura's theatrical remorse. She looked at the guests. She looked at the table beside her, where several glasses of red wine sat full and unattended. She picked one up. She looked at it. She looked at Yura's couture gown, intricate white embroidery, reportedly custom, reportedly $40,000. She poured it. Not quickly. Not in a rage. Slowly, deliberately, in a thin, steady stream, directly down the front of the gown, watching it spread with the attentiveness of someone performing a task they intend to do properly. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the room erupted, not in sound, exactly, but in motion. Phones rising. Hands covering mouths. A single stifled shriek from somewhere near the back. "Oh my God," Imani said, her voice gentle and carrying the same theatrical horror Yura had used, precisely calibrated, a perfect mirror. "I didn't see you there." Yura stared at her. The theatrical remorse was gone. What replaced it was something rawer. "You're insane," Yura whispered. "Maybe," Imani said calmly, "but my dress dried." Yura's composure cracked down the middle. "Do you know what you are to him?" Her voice had risen past the point of control. "You're a prop. A statement. He doesn't see you. He doesn't care about you. You're just something he picked up to make me feel insecure," Imani said. Yura stopped. "That's your word," Imani said. "Not mine. He never loved you." "I know," Imani said, and her voice was so calm and so direct that it took a moment for the room to process that she had simply agreed. "I've known that since the first conversation. That wasn't part of the arrangement." Yura turned to Wooyoung, who had moved to stand a few feet away at some point during this, his expression controlled and unreadable. "You brought her here to humiliate me," Yura said. "I brought her here," Wooyoung said, "because I refused to walk into your wedding and look like I hadn't moved on." "And did you?" Yura's voice cracked slightly. "Move on." "I did. Once." He paused. "Then you made it very difficult to remember why I had." "He cheated," Yura said sharply, gesturing at Imani, a bizarre redirection that the room processed with confusion before realizing she meant something else entirely, some other story from their past. "I know what you did," Wooyoung said quietly. "You don't. You chose power over what we had. You chose a position. And I'm not angry about it anymore." He looked at her steadily. "But I'm also not standing here pretending." That sentence, simple, delivered without anger, hit harder than anything else that had been said. Yura's hands were trembling. The groom, standing 15 feet away near the champagne tower, was looking at his shoes with the expression of a man who has made a significant mistake and is only now understanding its full dimensions. Imani touched Wooyoung's arm, just barely, just enough, and tilted her head toward the balcony. They slipped away from the noise. The balcony overlooked the garden and the city beyond it, the lights of Los Angeles spreading into the distance in every direction. It was quiet out here. The sounds from inside were muffled. Imani stood at the railing and looked out. "You're still hurt," she said. "I'm not. Your hands are shaking." A pause.
He looked down.
His hands were resting on the railing, and they were, in fact, not entirely still. "She cheated first," he said. It came out quietly. Not as an excuse, not quite, but as the thing beneath the anger, the fact that had been sitting at the foundation of the last several hours, maybe the last several months. Imani did not respond immediately. She looked out at the city. "When did you find out?" she asked. 8 months before the engagement ended. She turned to look at him. "And you stayed for 8 months," she said. He said nothing. "Because you don't like losing," she said. Something crossed his face. Complicated, layered, the expression of someone who has just heard an accurate description of something they have never said aloud. "I thought I could fix it," he said finally. "That's different from not wanting to lose." "Is it?" Silence. "Honest answer," she said. "Not the one you've been giving yourself for 8 months. Honest." He looked out at the city. A long time passed.
No, he said.
It isn't different. Inside, through the glass, the reception was continuing with the particular manic energy of an event that has absorbed a significant incident and is now collectively processing it through champagne and forced laughter. Near the low stage where the DJ had resumed playing something inoffensive, Yura was standing with a microphone that she had clearly been handed by an overeager event coordinator who thought a toast might redirect the evening's momentum. She waited until the room had quieted. She lifted the glass. "To my ex," she said, her voice recovered to something approaching warmth. "Thank you for showing everyone here exactly what I don't want." Laughter. Not unkind. The room was doing its best to normalize the evening, but present, and enough to settle Yura back into the feeling of having an audience on her side. Imani heard the laughter through the glass. She turned and looked at Wooyoung. He looked back at her. She opened the balcony door. She walked through the reception with the unhurried pace of someone who has decided exactly what they're going to do and sees no reason to rush. She took the microphone from the event coordinator's hand before Yura could set it down. She turned to face the room. "If you were truly happy," she said, "you wouldn't still be competing." The room went very still. "He didn't bring me here to make you jealous." She looked at Yura calmly. "You did that yourself. The moment you saw us walk in, you had a choice. Smile and move forward, or make it a war. You chose the war."
She paused.
"That's not his fault. That's not mine. That's yours." She set the microphone down on the nearest table. The room did not erupt. It didn't cheer. It simply sat with what she had said the way a room sometimes does when something true has been spoken aloud, and everyone present knows it, and nobody knows what comes after knowing it. Yura was crying. Not dramatically, just the kind of crying that happens when something lands and the body responds before the mind can stop it. The groom excused himself from where he was standing and walked, alone, toward the bar. Imani picked up her clutch from the table where she had left it. She found Wooyoung near the doorway. She didn't say anything. She just walked past him, and he followed. The car was waiting. They drove through the city in silence. Outside the windows, Los Angeles went about its business, indifferent, luminous, enormous. Somewhere near sunset, Wooyoung reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. He held it toward her. She looked at it. She looked at him. She did not take it. "Keep it," she said. "We had an arrangement." "We did. It's completed." She turned back to the window. "That's not what I want from this evening." "What do you want from this evening?"
She thought about it.
"Nothing," she said. "I want it to be over. I want to go home." He set the envelope on the seat between them. "You weren't performing there," he said. "I was never performing. The toast, that was for you. Not for me." "Yes. You don't care how I look." "I care about being disrespected. I handled it. Her opinion of you was never my concern." He was looking at her in the way that she had not seen from him before, not the calculating assessment from the lounge, not the contained expression at the wedding. Something quieter. "I thought I was bringing you there to win," he said. She waited. "I didn't feel like I won." She turned to look at him. "I felt like I dragged someone else's dignity into something that had nothing to do with her." He exhaled slowly. "And she handled it better than I did." "You handled it fine," she said. "I was shaking." "I know." A silence settled between them that was different from the ones before it. Not uncomfortable, not loaded, just present. Just the two of them in the back of a car driving through a city that asked nothing of either of them. She got out at her apartment building on Koreanmafiaboss without ceremony. She picked up her clutch and left the envelope on the seat.
"Good night," she said.
"Good night," he said. She did not look back. The days that followed were unremarkable in the way that days are when they are being used to push something down. She worked her shifts. She came home. She made tea and sat on the fire escape and watched the traffic on Koreanmafiaboss move and stop and move again. She told herself it had been a job. She told herself she had done what she said she would do, responded how she wanted, and walked away clean. She kept replaying his hands on the railing. Not shaking dramatically, just not entirely still. The small visible evidence of a man who built his entire life around appearing impenetrable and had, for just a moment, in front of someone who owed him nothing, let that go. She replayed the balcony. The way he had looked out at the city when she pushed him toward honesty. The way he had finally said no. It isn't different. Not because she had cornered him, but because she had simply waited. She replayed the car. I felt like I dragged someone else's dignity into something that had nothing to do with her. The fact that he had noticed. The fact that he had said it. She did not call him. There was no number to call. He had not given her one. She told herself this was fine. She told herself she was glad. She did not entirely believe herself, but she let it go, and she went to work, and she handled a different drunk investor on a Tuesday, and a noise complaint on a Wednesday, and a particularly difficult bachelorette party on a Friday, and she did not think about Wooyoung. Except that she did. Not constantly. Not obsessively. Just in the quiet edges of things, the last moment before sleep, the few minutes waiting for the light to change on her walk home. She thought about him the way you think about something that has gotten into the architecture of your thinking without announcing itself, and by the time you notice it, it has already made itself at home. She told herself, he was a client. It was a transaction. He didn't even give you his number. She told herself, he's dangerous. Not in the way the wedding guests sensed, wealthy, composed, connected, but in the specific way that men are dangerous when they are capable of honesty but choose not to use it as a habit. When they hold it back and release it only in moments of pressure. That kind of man is capable of giving you something extraordinary and then just as easily taking it back. She told herself all of this very clearly and very reasonably. And then 2 months later she walked out of the lounge at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and he was standing by the car.
No suit.
Dark jeans, a simple dark jacket, his hands in his pockets. No bodyguards flanking him, no car waiting with an open door, no performance of any kind. Just a man standing under a streetlight in West Hollywood looking slightly like he was unsure whether he had made a mistake coming here. She stopped. She crossed her arms. I'm not here to hire you, he said. I know, she said. I only worked that one event. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. He took a breath. Exhaled slowly. He looked like a person who had rehearsed something and was now deciding whether to say the rehearsed thing or something else. When you stood in that room, he said, you didn't look at me once. Not for approval. Not for backup. Not for permission. She waited. I've built everything around control. I know what people want from me before they ask for it. I position things. I manage outcomes.
He paused.
You walked into that room and you didn't need any of it. You were just complete. On your own. She studied him carefully. And I couldn't stop thinking about that, he said. For 2 months, I couldn't stop thinking about that. What is this? She said. What are you actually asking for? I'm not asking for anything, he said. I'm standing outside a lounge at 11:30 at night because I couldn't figure out how else to start this conversation, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, and he stopped. I would like a chance to do this properly. Do what properly? Be someone you'd choose to spend time with. She looked at him for a long moment. The street around them was quiet. A car passed. Somewhere down the block a restaurant was closing. The sound of chairs being lifted onto tables floating toward them in the cool air. This isn't revenge, she said.
No.
This isn't some statement about her? You haven't thought about this because it finally makes you look like you've won. No, he held her gaze. I haven't thought about her. Since when?
A pause.
Since the balcony, he said. Light rain began to fall, the thin, apologetic kind that Los Angeles produces when it remembers, briefly, that it is a city and not a desert. I don't know how to do simple, he said. I don't have a simple life. I have a complicated history and people who want things from me and things I've done that I'm not going to apologize for but that I understand are significant. He looked at her. I'm not standing here pretending I'm an easy thing to choose.
Good, she said.
I don't like easy. Something in his face shifted. Not a smile, not yet, but the thing just before one. I want you, he said quietly. Not as a statement. Not to prove anything. Not because of her or the wedding or any of it. Just you. He paused. The woman who twisted a man's arm and made him apologize loudly. The woman who poured wine on $40,000 of couture and didn't flinch. The woman who stood on a balcony and waited until I told the truth. He looked at her. That's who I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She looked at him.
She took her time.
You're complicated, she said. I know. You come with enemies. I know. You come with a past that's going to show up in rooms I walk into before you do. I know. But you didn't silence me, she said. At any point that night, you could have. You could have grabbed my arm in the car when you handed me the envelope. You could have stopped me from taking the microphone. You didn't. I never will, he said. That's not who I want to be with you. She studied his face in the thin rain. She looked for the calculation she had catalogued in the lounge the first night, the assessment, the positioning. She did not find it. What she found instead was a man standing in the rain outside her workplace at a time when he had absolutely nothing to gain, asking for something he clearly had no practice script for. She stepped forward. She reached up and pulled him down slightly by the collar, just barely, and kissed him. Slow. Intentional. The kind of kiss that is not an accident or an impulse, but a decision made clearly and enacted with full awareness. When she stepped back, he stayed where he was for a moment, slightly still, and then he let out a breath that sounded like something he had been holding for a long time. He rested his forehead against hers. No more hired appearances, he said. She smiled. No more jealous brides. Just us. Just us, she agreed. The rain continued, soft and indifferent. The Mafia boss had walked into that wedding expecting to win. He had not won. He had walked out of it with his composure intact and his pride reduced, and something unexpected in its place. The image of a woman standing in a wine-stained ballroom telling the truth to a room full of people who didn't want to hear it, and not looking at him once. He had spent 2 months trying to talk himself out of it. He had failed. And so he had driven to a lounge in West Hollywood and stood under a streetlight with no armor and no script and asked for the thing he actually wanted. She had said yes. Not because he was powerful. Not because of the money or the suit or the world he moved through. She said yes because he had stood on a balcony and shaken and told the truth. Because he had said I felt exposed and meant it. Because he had let her stand on her own. They didn't know what came next. His world was complicated, and she had meant it when she said that, and she was clear-eyed about what choosing him would mean. The history, the enemies, the rooms that would go quiet when she walked in. She was not naive. She had never been naive. But she was also not afraid. And neither, for perhaps the first time in a very long time, was he. They stood in the rain on a Tuesday night in West Hollywood, foreheads touching, not trying to win anything. Just choosing each other. And for now, in the quiet of that specific night, that was enough. Though what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, standing there with the rain in her hair and his forehead warm against hers, was that loving a man like Wooyoung was never going to be simple. But then again, she didn't like simple. And he had never, not once in his life, been anything other than exactly what he was. If you made it to the end, thank you. This story had a lot of heart, and you stayed for all of it. Hit the like button, it helps more than you think. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because men like Wooyoung's world does not stay quiet for long. Share this with someone who needs to see what it looks like when a woman walks into a room and needs absolutely no one's approval. And drop one word in the comments that describes Imani. Just one word. I read every single one. See you in the next story.